Before the era of photography, one of the few ways of immortalizing famous people was by commissioning a statue or a monument. But something has seriously gone wrong, because these are the top 15 most unusual statues and monuments. Number 15. Cadillac Ranch, Texas. Created in 1974 by members of an art collective called Ant Farm, the Cadillac Ranch in Amarillo, Texas is a collection of 10 Cadillacs that have been arranged in a row and buried headfirst into the sand. The cars, each of which dates between 1949 and 1963, were chosen to depict different iterations of the Cadillac design, and both fully functioning and junk vehicles were used. Originally, Cadillac Ranch was positioned in a rarely used wheat field, but with the ever-expanding borders of the city, the land's owner decided to relocate it in 1997, and now it sits alongside Interstate 40 to both move it further away from the city limits and to make it more accessible to visitors. Due to the striking appeal of the installation, the cars have featured in a number of music videos and advertising campaigns, and have been repainted several times since they were first put there. At one point they were all white, then pink, then black. But one of the most interactive parts of it is that visitors are encouraged to leave their own marks on the cars, which is why they're now a wide spectrum of color. Number 14. Genghis Khan Equestrian Statue, Mongolia. Genghis Khan is undoubtedly the most famous person to ever come from Mongolia, and while it isn't particularly unusual for a country to commission a statue to honor someone like that, the monument in the country's capital city Ulaanbaatar is truly next level. Built along the bank of the Toul River, where Khan was said to have found a golden whip, the statue is on top of a visitors complex that's dedicated to the memory of the Khans. The size of the statue, which is pointing towards his birthplace, is almost unbelievable. It is easily the largest equestrian statue in the world. Made of stainless steel, it's 131 feet or 40 meters tall and can be seen for miles around. Visitors to the museum are able to access a viewing gallery in the head of the horse, which is accessible by walking through its chest and neck. And the area surrounding the statue has 200 traditional yurt tents that were used by Genghis Khan's army and are arranged in the shape of the brand marks that they imprinted on all their horses. Number 13. The Freemont Troll, Seattle. Legend has it that anytime you cross a bridge, you may well be confronted by a troll that lives beneath it. But while you may be skeptical whether such creatures can be found in a place like that, there's one city in where it's very much true. The Freemont Troll is a public sculpture that was installed beneath the northern end of the George Washington Memorial Bridge in Seattle, Washington, and is so big that the object you see in its left hand is a full-size Volkswagen Beetle, making it look as if the troll has snatched it straight off the road above. Originally, the car also contained a time capsule, within which was a bust of Elvis Presley, but this has since been stolen following one of the many acts of vandalism against the statue. Created in 1990, the troll is 18 feet or 5.5 meters high, and because it's made from steel rebar, wire, and concrete, it weighs 13,000 pounds, which is the equivalent of 5,900 kilograms. It took the efforts of 4 local artists to complete, each of which has full rights to the image of the troll, and have used these rights to sue local businesses that have tried to use pictures of it without written permission. Despite the controversy this has led to, there's no doubt that the installation of the statue has been a major improvement for the site, which had previously simply been used as a dumping ground. Number 12. St. Wenceslas riding a dead horse, Prague, Czech Republic. The city of Prague in the Czech Republic is full of stunning Gothic architecture and surprising sights at virtually every turn you take. But if you find yourself walking into the Art Nouveau Lucerna Palace, you'll be confronted with something very unusual. Normally, kings and historical figures are depicted riding their horses, but the statue that hangs in the center of the atrium shows something quite different: St. Wenceslas sitting atop a dead horse. The design was created by renowned Czech artist David Černý, who was most famous for painting a Soviet tank pink and several surreal art installations. He's not publicly revealed his inspiration for this strange work, but it's thought to be a parody of one of the most famous statues of King Wenceslas in Prague, one where he sat on a living horse in the center of Wenceslas Square. As for the reason why he decided this was a necessary thing to do, it probably was a critique of Václav Klaus, the then president of the Czech Republic, with whom the artist had serious political disagreements. Number 11. The Bull Fart Sculpture, Beijing, China. What you see might not be real, is an artwork that was created by Chinese artist Chen Wingling and was put on display at a gallery in Beijing in 2010. While at first the artwork may seem purely surreal, if you look closer you'll see that it was the commentary on the state of the world affairs at the time. The person being slammed into the wall by the bull is one of the biggest con men ever, Bernie Madoff, and the huge cloud of gas emerging from the bull's rear end is supposed to represent the danger of bubbles that form within the international financial markets. The message, according to the artist, is that people often try to create false impressions, especially when they stand to make a lot of money, and that it's the innocent and less fortunate in society that usually fall for the deceit. Madoff, who was sentenced to 150 years in jail because of his Ponzi scheme, is shown with horns and is the worst of Wall Street greed. What's not clear, though, is whether the artist intends it as a critique of the capitalist system or of the communist one, where people who commit such crimes aren't so commonly punished on the public stage in the same way. Either way, it's just as enjoyable if you see it as just one thing, an incredibly flatulent bull using its powers to slam a man into a wall. Number 10. The Mustangs of Las Colinas, Texas. It's hardly a surprise to learn that when you go to Texas, you're going to see horses, and lots of them. But in Williams Square in Las Colinas, there's a series of statues dedicated to the animals. Known as the Mustangs of Las Colinas, there are 9 of them in various poses that appear to be running across the square, and with the use of fountains are made to look like they're splashing through water as they go. The horses, which are 1.5 times larger than real ones, are made from bronze and are simply stunning, especially at night when they're lit up. The idea of the installation was the brainchild of Ben H. Carpenter, a local businessman who was turning his ranch into a residential and business complex called Las Colinas. He wanted something at the center to represent the animals that were so crucial to the development of Texas and the people's drive, initiative, and overall determination and sacrifice that helped the state grow from the days of the pioneers. Despite being huge, the statues are set in a plaza that's surrounded by large developments, so they don't at any point feel overpowering. Because of how graceful they are, they've become a popular attraction in their own right and have thousands of visitors each year who want to see them for themselves. Number 9. Upside Down Monument of Charles Latrobe, Melbourne, Australia. Australia is known as the land down under, but it seems an artist decided to take this quite literally in the design of a new statue for the campus of La Trobe University in Melbourne. It was created by a local sculptor, Charles Robb, to depict Charles Latrobe, the first Lieutenant Governor of the Australian state of Victoria when it was incorporated in 1851. Latrobe had been a traveler, exploring Mexico and climbing mountains in the Alps, so when he was sent to Australia he had little experience in managing a community. Still, despite these limitations, he did a lot to improve the state, including creating a reliable water supply and founding institutions such as the City University, the Botanical Gardens, and the Royal Melbourne Hospital. History hasn't been too kind to Latrobe, though. There are only 2 monuments to him in the city. The 16-foot or 4.9-meter tall one at the university, though is highly unusual because it's completely upside down. The reason for this was the artist's desire to, in his words, quote, address the tension between the authority of the monument and its invisibility in the public space, while simultaneously addressing the authorless nature of the figurative monument, end quote, and that it embodies the idea that universities should turn ideas on their heads. Do you think he succeeded? We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. The Fork, Vevey, Switzerland. The town of Vevey, which is on the northern shoreline of Lake Geneva in Switzerland, is one of the most picturesque places in the world. But just as you begin to think there are stunning vistas in virtually every direction, you'll notice something jutting up from the waters of the lake, which isn't exactly in keeping with its surroundings. It's one of the most unusual monuments in the world and is part of the Alimentarium, which is a museum dedicated to Nestlé's history and food of the region. Known as the Fork of Vevey, it's a 26-foot or 8-meter tall and 4.3-foot or 1.3-meter wide statue of a fork that's been placed in the shallows. Created by Swiss artist Jean-Pierre Zaug and first installed in 1995 to commemorate the museum's 10th anniversary, it's claimed that this is the largest fork in the world. Despite currently being recognized as such by Guinness World Records, it's somewhat of a controversial record, since there are 2 other larger forks, one that's in Springfield, Missouri, and another that can be found in Colorado. Number 7. Le Pas Mirail, Paris, France. As such a historic city, you'll find countless statues and monuments throughout Paris, each of which relates to an important time in the city's past. But more recently, Parisian artists have turned to more surreal installations, and Le Passe-Muraille is up there as one of the best. Translating to mean the passer through walls, it was created as an homage to the famous French work of fiction in which the titular character meets an unfortunate end when he finds himself stuck within a wall after causing mayhem across Paris. The novel isn't particularly well known outside of the French-speaking world, but it's popular enough within France that the sculpture was deemed worthy. Made from brass and mounted against a stone wall, just his upper body, both his arms and his right leg, have managed to escape captivity. If you look closely, you'll notice that his left hand is much shinier than the rest of the statue. This wasn't at all how the artist had intended, but it's been worn away and shined by the thousands of visitors who, when visiting the statue, have grabbed onto his hand and attempted to pull him free of the wall. Number 6. Monument to Sigmund Freud, Prague, Czech Republic. As the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud is one of history's most famous neurologists who practically invented the field of science dedicated to understanding mental health. Of course, he's also well known for having some rather ridiculous theories which have since been proven to be wildly inaccurate. But there's no doubt that without his work, the field of psychiatry would be nowhere near what it is today. It seems fitting then that there's a statue of him, and perhaps equally as fitting that there's a particularly surreal one of him. Created by Czech sculptor David Černý, it's called Man Hanging Out and depicts Freud holding onto a pole with one hand as he's hanging over a cobbled street below. One of the more controversial things about the statue is that it's quite lifelike when seen from a distance, and has led to a number of instances when concerned passers-by have called police to try to rescue him. It became so popular that it was actually removed from its original place and toured around the world in cities including London and Grand Rapids in Michigan. It has now been returned to its original spot, where it's planned it will stay forever. According to the artist, it's a statement about intellectualism in the 20th century and his own uncertainty of it. And while it's doubtful that everyone who sees it will think in such a provocative way, it'll at least encourage them to look up and appreciate the architectural splendor of the city. Number 5. Die Badende, Hamburg, Germany. When the sun comes out and the weather begins to warm up, people flock to their local waterways to top up their tan and swim in the cool currents. But as residents of the city of Hamburg in Germany, the Inner Elster Lake was transformed for 10 days in 2011 with the installation of a new artwork, which depicted a woman relaxing in the water no matter the weather. Known as Die Badende, which means the bather, she was created by German artist Oliver Voss as part of a promotional campaign for a new soap company. From a distance, she may have seemed like a normal-sized person, but the closer people got to the structure, the more they realized quite how big she was. Measuring 67 feet, or just over 20 meters long and weighing more than 2 tons, she definitely became a hurdle for boaters trying to use the lake. Although she attracted her fair share of curious locals who hired boats simply to get up close to her. Rising high out of the water, she has her knees raised up too. But while plenty of people were astonished by the sculpture, not everyone was impressed. The mayor of the district complained that she was sullying the beloved lake, but he didn't have to wait long until things were returned to normal. After the event, the bather was removed from the water by a crane, with the company responsible for it saying they had a giant towel in waiting so they'd be able to quickly dry her off. Number 4. Headington Shark, Oxford, England. Sharks are some of the most dangerous and feared creatures on the planet, but unless a sharknado comes tearing through your neighborhood, you wouldn't exactly expect to see one inland from the coast. Residents of Oxford in England have become all too accustomed to a landlocked shark, because since 1986 there's been a huge one lodged into the roof of a residential home. The property was owned by a local radio presenter who wanted to commission something unusual for his house. And he worked with sculptor John Buckley to create Untitled 1986, which is now more commonly called the Headington Shark. Made from painted fiberglass, it took 3 months to complete and immediately garnered attention from around the world. The shark itself is 25 feet or 7.6 meters long and weighs approximately 440 pounds or 200 kilograms. While it may seem like fun, there was a serious intent behind the work. It was installed on the 41st anniversary of when the atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, and was said by the owner to, quote, express someone feeling totally impotent, ripping a hole in their roof out of a sense of impotence and anger and frustration, end quote. Despite the numerous attempts by the local council and residents to have it removed, the shark is still in its original position and has never been renovated to ensure it lasts for a long time. If you want a chance to see it up close for yourself, the property is now listed on Airbnb for a truly unique experience. Number 3. The Silent Evolution, Mexico. Most structures and monuments in the world are designed to gain as much visibility as possible. But the creators behind the Cancun Underwater Museum have built something that only people able to dive will ever be able to see in real life. Conceived in 2008, it's been realized that tourism was causing huge damage to the coral reefs on Cancun. But because authorities wanted to continue attracting tourists, they decided to make something that would be just as intriguing, but not at such a risk of devastation. By working in collaboration with British artist Jason DeCaires Taylor, along with 5 local Mexican artists, more than 500 sculptures were crafted from pH-neutral concrete and carefully lifted into place by a crane, each one being submerged at depths between 9.8 and 20 feet, or 3 and 6 meters. Part of the exhibit, called The Silent Evolution, has more than 400 human figures interacting with the environment around them while covering their faces. The idea is to encourage us to consider our own actions and the impact they have on our surroundings. Since opening in 2011, the museum has proved to be a resounding success, and other countries around the world are now looking at it as a blueprint for how they can expand their own tourism industries without risking further damage to the ecosystem. Number 2. Memorial to Nelson Mandela, South Africa. Nelson Mandela will always be remembered as one of the most influential campaigners for equal rights the world has ever known. Arrested for his political views in apartheid South Africa, he was imprisoned for 27 years on Robben Island Prison and then Pollsmoor Prison, where he became a symbol of hope against the outwardly racist regime. He was finally released in 1990, and after dedicating what remained of his life to human rights, he became the president of South Africa and was finally able to start enacting the change that the country sorely needed. This led him to winning the Nobel Peace Prize and improving the lives of countless people across the world. It's his actions that he'll be most remembered for, but it's also right that monuments and statues have been installed across the country in memory of someone who literally put his life on the line for the benefit of others. While there are a number of traditional monuments to Mandela, one of the most creative and unusual installations was created by Marco Cianfinelli from Johannesburg. Made up of a series of 50 steel plates, which are each 30 feet or 9 meters high, were meticulously laser cut and then buried into the ground. It looks from most angles like a collection of abstract objects, but when you're stood in precisely the right place, you'll see an image of Mandela's face. The idea behind it is that in apartheid South Africa, he was all but invisible to the establishment, and it was only his perseverance and dedication that forced them to stand and take notice of him. Number 1. Hand of the Desert, Chile. Quite often, some of the most incredible artworks are installed in places that are incredibly hard to reach, and that's certainly the case with the Hand of the Desert, which can be found deep within the Atacama Desert in Chile. Created by Chilean sculptor Mario Irarrázaval, the base and core of the hand are made from iron and concrete, and the full structure is 36 feet or 11 meters tall. The idea was to help encourage new visitors to the area, which is around 37 miles or 60 kilometers to the southeast of the city of Antofagasta, and to inspire people to think about the vastness and intransigent nature of the desert, where life can exist and vanish without the wider world realizing anything had happened at all. The exaggeration of the size of the features is intended to highlight the vulnerability, helplessness, and fragility of human life, and is meant to represent a hand reaching out in friendship. While it may well be in a remote place, it's very close to Route 5, which is a part of the Pan American Highway, and means a great deal of visitors pass by each year. You can see the hand from miles away in the approach, and if you ever get a chance to visit, you'll probably find other people standing there too, contemplating their place in the world. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.